With the fall of legacy media, millennials and Gen Z find themselves on X, Substack, Instagram to be able to get their news. And today I'm meeting with the founder of one of the organizations that has captured women throughout the country. From everything from fashion to news, I think it's time we spill some sweet tea. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Sweet Tea series. My name is Ariana Guajardo. I'm so excited that you guys are joining me today. I'm usually in Austin, Texas, but today I'm actually set up in DC, and I'm meeting with the founder of and the CEO of the Conservateur, Jayme Franklin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, this is actually my first time in DC.
That is crazy to me. Welcome to this liberal madness here.
See, at least in Austin, I'm kind of used to liberal stuff, and I will say at least your city is a little bit cleaner.
Really? DC's cleaner. Well, that's good to hear. I think it's a little dirty. Trump's cleaned it up a little bit since he's been in office.
Yeah, that's probably helpful. You know, I was telling a few people, like just walking from the office that we have downtown, trying to get to places to eat to lunch. It's a little bit of a maze of trying to keep yourself safe while you're on the streets there. But, you know, I've survived so far.
Yeah. People are probably a little bit nicer in Texas than they are in DC, but DC's there's so much history here. It's a beautiful city. I think it's kind of European in a way, and I don't know. I really like living here, but I've only lived in liberal places.
There's beautiful designs, though, like seeing the architecture and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's just so well preserved. Again, the trees and everything are absolutely gorgeous. I've enjoyed my time here so far.
Well, welcome to DC. I'm so happy to be on here with you.
Okay, I do have a question. Do you think I'm out of place, though, with the white boots? Like, is that unusual for the...
Okay, I wish I lived in Texas. I've been telling my husband this because I want to wear my cowboy boots everywhere. But honestly, I kind of feel like they're in any city, and so I love it.
That's true.
Own your Texas heritage and rock them. I wear cowboy boots here sometimes too.
Okay, cool. See, I like the Texas enthusiasm that's even just breaking the walls back to the rest of America. So that's awesome. Wait, so how long have you been in the DC area then?
So I moved here in 2020. I grew up in Northern California. I grew up right outside of San Francisco. And then I went to UC Berkeley. So I spent basically my whole life till I was 22 in Northern California. Then in 2020, I moved out to DC, and then I did a 1-year stint up in New York, and then my husband and I got married, and I moved back to DC.
Nice, okay. And then so right now you're running or you're the CEO of the Conservateur, which if you don't know, first just go onto Instagram and find their page because it is gorgeous. I think I first found you guys through Instagram and was just blown away. It's all the beautiful, Americana, just celebrating femininity, but also I think just encouraging people to be informed and think about the world around them. So how long has the Conservateur been around now?
So I launched it right after I graduated. So I graduated Cal in 2020. My parents were like, you're not allowed to launch this till you graduate, because I always say Antifa started in Berkeley. People were crazy there. So I launched it that summer. It was a crazy summer if you put yourself back in the shoes of 2020, COVID, BLM. So it wasn't timed that way, and it ended up being that way. And we received so much hate at the beginning. I can't even explain to you, especially my co-founder also grew up in the Bay Area. So we both kind of, grew up in liberal circles and didn't have a ton of conservative support, but a few months after launching, we just started growing this amazing community of just beautiful, smart, and sophisticated young women that just felt completely misrepresented by mainstream magazines and women's culture.
That's awesome. But how you were in California? How did you end up growing up as a conservative over there, and how did you keep that going?
So I grew up Catholic, and I went to Catholic school basically my whole life. I did a little bit.
I didn't know you were also Catholic.
Yeah,
I am too.
Oh, amazing. And so my parents are actually both Canadian, but my dad grew up, a lot of people don't know Canadian geography very well. My dad grew up in Alberta, which is above Montana, so very similar politics to Montana. He's a small business owner. My parents were always very proud to become American. They wanted to be American and moved here. I was born here, and so my dad kind of raised me as, I would say, more on the economy, economically conservative. And I feel back when I was growing up in the 2000s, people just agreed on a lot more of social issues. There wasn't just this far push on racial politics, on LGBTQ extremism. I kind of feel we were all on the similar page. And then I felt after Trump was elected in 2016, the left just went off the deep end. And I grew up pro-life. I grew up believing in traditional marriage and just, regular Catholic principles. And I just got more and more into politics, especially being at Berkeley, and it just felt very alienating being there on how far left people were and just how much they hated, I guess, who I was as a person, being a conservative and a Christian. And It really inspired my interest in politics. And then I moved out here and I interned for a summer in Senate, and I just loved it from there. And I kind of feel like my interest in politics has grown to be a lot more on the cultural side, especially becoming a mom and having a daughter and getting married. I just think there's a lot at stake in this country, and I really believe there's a spiritual crisis, but I think we're headed in the right direction. I think you're starting to see the culture shift, especially with young men. But I think we have a lot of work to do with young women.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all that you were saying that the cultural stuff is the thing that grabs you. I think for a lot of conservative women, those are the more important issues. And then even like whenever you approach things like economics or other issues, a lot of it comes from like relating it back to the cultural stuff and the importance of preserving that. Like the reason the economy is important is because the family is important, and that one thing affects the other.
Exactly.
But while you were at Berkeley, what were you studying when you were there?
I was doing American history, which was crazy because I grew up with a regular American, even though I grew up in liberal California, I did grow up with like a pretty pro-American history. And when I went to Berkeley, you would think that we were the worst country on earth, the way that they taught history. Yeah. But I think going to Cal was really great for me because it challenged my beliefs on everything. And a lot of conservatives are kind of like encouraging people not to go to college. I understand that for a lot of reasons, but I do think that there is an argument to be said that it's good to get out of your bubble. And I think it makes you a smarter and stronger conservative.
You know, so I went to UT Austin, which by no means was as crazy as Berkeley.
But it's
for
close.
Texas.
Yeah, no, it is.
For Texas, it was like the Berkeley of Texas.
Yeah,
in terms
totally.
Of the liberal stuff.
Yeah.
But I was less conservative going into college than when I left.
Same.
Because I had to, like when I was for the first time surrounded by people who did not agree with me at all, and it challenged me to actually learn what I believe and why. And I think we have a similar experience of growing up Catholic, and my background was just going into college was, okay, I know that I'm pro-life, and I know that I don't want to introduce myself with my preferred pronouns every single time I'm anywhere. So that's how I got involved in the conservative stuff.
Yeah.
Did you ever get doxxed or anything while you were there?
Yeah, I kind of stayed a little bit more under the radar, I would say, genuinely for safety issues. Like Berkeley's insane. Like people will when Ben Shapiro came to campus or Ann Coulter. I remember I went to go see Ann Coulter's speech. I think it was my senior year at Cal. And we had to be escorted by police to go in. Like it was that insane. But I'll never forget my first day at Berkeley. And like I said, I grew up in liberal California, and they were like, go around the circle and introduce yourself with your pronouns. And I was like, my maiden name is Chandler. So I was like, well, I'm Miss Chandler. I'm not married. And they were like, no, your pronouns. And I was like, Miss, yeah, not married yet. And they were like, no. And I was wearing a skirt. And they were like, no, he, she, and I was like, is this a joke? Like, I just remember being like, what? And so that was my first time where I had heard about those pronouns was in 2016 on Cal's campus. And I always said Cal was like 4 years ahead of like the rest of the world because after I feel like when I was graduating from Cal, that's when the pronoun thing blew up everywhere. And a lot of these ideas that I saw on Cal's campus really percolated into the rest of the national conversation.
See, that's interesting. You were probably for one of those first years where they were starting to use where the preferred pronoun thing kind of became the thing at liberal universities.
Yeah.
So I was 2 years behind you whenever I went into college.
Yeah.
And so by that point, I knew that was kind of a thing on campuses going in.
Yeah.
The way that I address this, and I actually would recommend people do it this way, I would just, because you know how usually it's say your name, your preferred pronoun, and a fun fact about you, or what your major is. I would just skip over the preferred pronouns, and then if people asked and followed up, I would just say, oh, I'm a woman. And
that's a very good point, because I think a lot of conservatives, because we're polite people in general, a lot of us are Christians, and we don't like to be rude or I guess disrespectful to people, but I totally believe in what you just said, because the minute you start going along with that, you're buying into their ideology, which is why if there is a man trying to present himself as a woman to me, I don't go along with it anymore. It's not about being rude, but it's like we need to stand in our truth, and that's your way to push back. And I just think you shouldn't be lying to people. I think it does way more harm than good.
Right. And the other way that I was, because I studied film at UT, so not only was I, at the most liberal, or one of the most liberal universities in Texas, I was also in one of the more liberal majors in Texas. They were all sorts of interesting people.
A lot of theater kids, probably.
Well, that was a separate major, and that was a whole different thing, thankfully. But no, film was just as interesting. I had like 3 TAs during the time while I was there that went by they, them pronouns.
Yeah.
The way that I went about it was just not trying to address them by their name and not with the pronoun. And I found that to be an easy way to both, I guess, show that I respected them as people, but not... And I didn't want to make them uncomfortable, but I also wasn't reaffirming something that I didn't believe in, and that worked pretty well for me, and I'm glad that I struck that balance.
Good for you. It takes a lot of bravery and confidence to do that at a young age in college when it's being forced down your throat.
But you know, it was actually getting doxxed that threw me into that. I feel like at some point we need to exchange like college war stories about what we went through.
I feel like I've like blocked so much of it. But no, like I said, I think it was great experiences for both of us, and obviously shaped who we are today, and I wouldn't do it any differently.
But what I'm guessing is then, so because you weren't like the outward conservative that you are now, whenever you stepped out the gate, launched the Conservateur, what was that like, being able to finally speak your opinion? And tell me about what that founding was like.
That is a crazy story. So we launched 3 days before the whole George Floyd thing happened. Wow. And I think a lot of conservatives can remember this, that like basically even like normal people who maybe weren't like super liberal, like people lost their minds that summer. And I think it was a culmination of COVID, the election coming up, a lot of pressure around that. And, you know, when people, I think Americans are good people. And so when they saw the whole George Floyd thing go down, it was very upsetting to a lot of people. And I understand that. But I think the pressure campaign, if you remember posting the black square and that you had to post and all of this crazy BLM stuff. And I remember I went on, this is like going back, but I went onto BLM's webpage and started reading what it's about. And it was against the nuclear family. It was for prison abolition. And so I'm like, I can't get on board with any of this. I wish the Floyd family all of their prayers, but I don't think that I didn't believe in the narrative that there is some systemic racism within police departments across America. I believe that, I'm back the blue. I believe that policemen, 99.9% are great and brave men and women that put their lives out on the line every day. And so I was completely against everything to do with that. And I lost a lot of friends by standing against that. And like I said, we had launched the Conservateur, and once you launch it, you can't pull it back. And people were attacking me left and right as racist, which I was like, what in this day and age? Like, I was like, I'm not racist. This is insane. People, I remember like 4th of July came around shortly after that, and people were hating on our whole country, which I completely disagreed with. I'm so proud to be an American. And we just received like from close friends, honestly, so much hate. I had people calling me and being like, I can't associate with you anymore, Jayme. Like, and my whole life changed. And at the same time, I started working on the Trump campaign where I met my husband. And so I just moved out to DC and just developed like a whole new great group of friends here with conservative people. And obviously there were some people from my hometown that stood by me, and I'm so appreciative of that to this day. But it takes a lot of bravery and courage to put yourself out there, and it's not easy. I understand why a lot of people don't do it. But I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And my co-founder and I were actually getting dinner last night. We were talking about it. Like looking back on that, it got brought up in a conversation.
Yeah, walking down memory lane together.
Yeah, exactly. And we're like, honestly, nothing phases you now. Like when people like send hate, I'm like, oh, whatever. Like we ripped off the Band-Aid, and it was so worth it. We had a party for the Conservateur back in April, a few months ago, and women from around the country flew in to come celebrate the Conservateur and tell us how much they just love the community we built. And it was really just a moment where I look back and I'm like, I'm so thankful for the women that supported us, and that this was so worth it in the end. So that's my biggest advice for conservatives. You might lose some friends, but honestly, if someone can't be friends with you because you have a different political opinion, they're not worth a friendship anyway. So sometimes it's good to get the truth out there.
So what do you think has drawn so many women to really love the content that you guys are putting out, and even wanting to participate in it? Because I know that women throughout the country, I think, right for you guys. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I would say we have 2 goals at the Conservateur. One is to represent conservative women who are just been completely left out of the whole media sphere, whether that be fashion magazines, blogs. I grew up, I wanted to go in fashion, reading Vogue, Elle magazine, Teen Vogue, which is, by the way, the most insane. It's like actual, they like publish articles about Karl Marx. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. But I think it's to represent those women who just have been completely alienated. And I always say feminism is so hypocritical because they purport to celebrate all women, but the minute that you're a conservative woman, you're completely excluded from that, and they'll come at you and be the most vicious. The most vicious people in my entire life to me have always been feminists, not men. It's always feminists that will just come at you. And so it's to represent those women, but also we really want to build bridges with the other side. I think there's a lot of women who are not super political, or maybe they just kind of grew up on their college campus and they're starting to lean left because of what they've been told and the narrative that's been forced down their throats. And so we're supposed to be, I think, a bridge to like bring people back over to the side of sanity. And like there's beautiful, sophisticated women who are conservative. I think some people think that conservatives are just men or just people who might live in like Alabama, for example. And it's like, no, there's conservatives across this country, and we can all come together and believe in sanity, Christian values, and be proud Americans. And so I would say that's our secondary point that we like to do.
I really think that the audience that you've created, though, kind of rejects the trends that are happening right now. So you celebrate, like you said, like traditional families and the family unit and like actually embracing femininity and womanhood, but you're not going through the online trad wife kind of thing either. And you're kind of finding that balance of being able to celebrate the things that actually make women women, but not also care, because I feel like so many people online make caricatures of women now.
It's totally
in both
true.
directions.
Yeah.
So I've been, like for me, like finding y'all stuff has been just a huge help, I guess, in seeing that, oh, this is like how you find that balance and that,
I love that you said that, because that's exactly what we're aiming to do. And like I said, the trad wife movement, I think, is actually great in a lot of ways, because it is celebrating traditional femininity and motherhood, which was just so needed in this national conversation. But you don't have to be on a farmstead in order to be a conservative woman. You don't need to have 9 kids. We're about celebrating women who are young in their careers. We're about encouraging them towards motherhood and marriage. And I think a lot of girls that resonate with the Conservateur do live in like a liberal city where they're looking at the dating scene and their friends and their job, and they're like, this just doesn't reflect my values. And so they can find values that do align with them more with us. But that's exactly our goal. You know, we want to bring in city conservatives as well as those trad wife conservatives, because there's like a little bit of something for everything at the Conservateur.
So what I'm wondering is, once you have more women who are like, you know, this is actually beautiful. This is an alternative to feminism, but they're still showing that, like, I think something that differentiates you again from some of the people in the whole trad wife movement is you guys celebrate women who have careers but also have families. So let's say that there's women who love that, they're attracted to it. How do those women who are conservative now pass that on to the next generation? Because I think a lot about how we're as a conservative movement, we're doing now the work now to try to get younger people involved in it. But then how do you continue that for the kids after that?
Yeah, I think it's about changing the culture. Andrew Breitbart famously once said that politics is downstream from culture, and that could not be more true. And you saw when, I think when the U.S. became very left-leaning a few years ago, it's because the left dominates the culture, whether it be Hollywood, the magazines we read, social media. And I think conservatives in this podcast age and now on social media are trying to, you know, claw their way back in. And I think that's very smart, because that influences the way that people think in this modern age. And so I think it's very important for conservatives to get their voice out, be brave. But I also think the church is a huge component of it. And it's about getting back into church and creating communities there, because I do believe as a conservative, the church and biblical principles are the foundation of what we believe. And so if you're a God-fearing Christian, you're most likely going to be conservative. It's just no coincidence that if you look at the national politics, the Republican and Democrat Party do kind of break down on Christian versus secular lines.
So how do you think that will translate then whenever, like, you already have a daughter? How do you, how do you make sure that she grows up to have these conservative values as well?
Yeah, so that's a huge also part of the Conservateur for me. This is like my mission, that my daughter has better stuff to read. I mean, I'm disgusted by what you read in Cosmopolitan magazine. For me, going to Berkeley as well, I think a huge component of what actually inspired me to launch the Conservateur is I was so against being pro-life and just being pro-woman. I was so against this casual sex culture that you see have really taken over the whole dating scene. And I really think feminism is a huge component for that, and has completely broken down, like, I would say the number one issue that young people in their 20s in college and beyond come up and talk to me about is just how hard the dating scene is right now. And I think it really has to do a lot with that. And so I don't want my daughter being encouraged to do the sexual revolution and all of that craziness. I want her growing up with good values that tell women to respect themselves and respect their bodies. And you're not going to find that in other magazines at the moment, which is why it is important that we create outlets like the Conservateur that are passing on good values to the next generation.
You know, I think that's a great transition actually to talking about some of the divide right now between younger men and younger women, because you brought up the dating culture right now, which I feel like we're both lucky that we're both out of the dating scene now.
Yeah.
Because I do not envy my friends having to go through that right now. What do you think some of the problems are that young women are facing with dating, and how do we repair that culture?
Well, I talk a lot about this now, but you know, your relationship should be based on biblical principles. What's amazing about the Bible is, even though it's over 2,000 years old, it gives you a context to what makes a great man and what makes a great woman. And in this modern age, you can't talk about that. There's just such a confusion and chaos right now with like gender roles and traditional ways to approach relationships. And you even see conservatives falling into that. And so my biggest piece of advice is to find people in the church, find people who are like-minded, and go back to the Bible when you're dealing with issues in your relationship or your marriage. You go back to the Bible and you figure out like what is your role as a man and as a father, and what is your role as a wife and a mother.
Yeah, and I think another thing that you were addressing earlier is the role and the importance of the church, because that's where you're able to build community. And then from there, I mean, that's where you would find people who share similar values to you.
Yeah, and look at the therapy industry. Everybody's in therapy all the time. Yeah. And I think therapy has been, especially for young women, a huge detriment to our culture. And if people instead went to the church and were able to get guidance and help through biblical perspectives, I think you would see way more success with friendships, relationships, families, and keeping people together. And I think another issue that people are facing in the dating scene is that women, I know we're wanting to talk about this, women are going more and more left if you look at graphs of where the politics are, and men are going further and further right. And
especially
so
with
such
Gen
a
Z,
divide.
there's like that pulling away.
There's such a divide, and I don't like being I hate being so political all the time, but you know, if you'd asked me 15 years ago, can you date somebody that votes differently than you? I would say absolutely. Now there's just fundamental differences on how you approach life, and I mean, even like you talk about the LGBTQ issues or like the extreme racial narratives and DEI and all of this wacko left-wing ideologies, and it's very hard to bridge those divides there. And so unfortunately, I do think that we are kind of locked into those silos with politics, which I think is a really sad state for our country at the moment.
Well, I'm going to raise, I think this might be a more difficult one to address because it's not solely cultural, but there's also a weird like educational divide happening right now where younger women are seeking higher levels of degrees on average than men are, and kind of getting into their careers in a different place than a lot of their male counterparts. Do you think that that's like a contributing factor to the unevenness in the dating sphere?
For sure. I think there's a lot of, I'm very much plugged into the motherhood realm, and a lot of like millennial women, even though we're Gen Z, but a lot of millennials have children. Right. And this is where I go back to just on like the traditional gender roles and why they've worked for thousands of years. I think a lot of women are trying to have it all and do this like crazy career and have their children in daycare all day. And there's a lot of animosity in these relationships between men and women because I just don't think that works very well, if I'm being honest. And so I'm not against women having a career, but I do believe in that traditional structure works. I don't speak on behalf of every single family, but I think in general, it makes more sense to have the man be the provider and the woman stay at home with her children. And what's so great is like, I look at myself, for example, I am able to have a career and stay at home with my daughter because we live in this digital age where I can, dabble and still have passions outside and still be able to be a part of the political movement. But my children will always come before all of that for me. And I think that going back to the traditional roles makes the most sense and will create the most happiness. And I think a lot of women are finding that they're feeling completely unfulfilled in their careers and just completely burnt out, and they're not able to enjoy those little moments with their children. And I don't ever like attacking women in general for going to work and having daycare. There are situations where, of course, that's necessary, but that shouldn't be, in my opinion, what's aspired to be. I think people should be inspired to stay at home and be with their children as much as they can.
Yeah, and it's something that I've talked about multiple times on the show. So my mom is an optometrist, and for a lot of my life, after we moved to be, we had to move to be closer to her family in the Rio Grande Valley, and the sphere that my dad, when we lived in Austin when I was little, he was like in the startup tech stuff, and just like working, startup would happen, he'd work there for a while, get spot out, and he was in that sphere that didn't exist in the Rio Grande Valley. So when we moved there, I actually had, for the most part, kind of a stay-at-home dad, and he did some he'd do a little bit of work just from home, and my mom was an optometrist. But one thing I've talked about is how she was able to work part-time and do fill-in work, so she was able to prioritize our schedules and what we needed to make sure she showed up for things. So what I always encourage is just people prioritizing their family
Yeah.
above what you want. At the end of the day, you need to put other people's needs above your own, and that's just part of the Christian. I think the life of Christian living in general.
I love what you just brought up, because I think leftism is fundamentally such a selfish way of viewing things. If you look at, it's obsessively talking about one's identity and one's happiness over and over again. And as Christians, it's the complete opposite. We do believe in serving others. And one day when you die, your job is going to hire someone new in 2 days, but your family is going to bring on the legacy for the rest of your life. And I hope on my deathbed I have a big family that I'm looking back on and that I'm proud of, because that's real legacy and honor. And I just don't think you'll ever find that out of a career. And it's not anti-woman to say that. Women have this amazing power in femininity to nurture and raise children. It is the most important job in society, and I cannot stand when leftists dismiss that, because it's such a special thing that we have that I don't think men can replicate. And I'm a big believer in traditional marriage and traditional family units, and I do think the men in a family unit have also have a different but equal job in raising children, that you are the provider of the household and you're the leader of the household, and your children look to you for stability and peace within the family. And so I think men and women have different roles in a marriage that come together and create that perfect family unit.
Yeah. And if people, well, first of all, that was beautiful, but if there's people who feel inspired by that and want to be able to find that kind of conservative community, or find people who are speaking about women and issues that matter to them, where can they find you guys?
So we're on Instagram right now, and then we're going to be starting up our podcast. We're very excited in the next month, where we're going to be actually just really diving into a lot of these cultural issues, talking about young motherhood. What's so great is I'm a young mom, and my two other co-hosts, we're all Gen Z. One is like crazy. She's on Fox every day in her career. And my other co-founder is just this amazing, beautiful fashion woman who just is such an inspiration when it comes to all of that. So I love that we're in like different places in life and have different perspectives to share, because I think that's going to be so exciting to bring to the conservative movement.
That's amazing. And so where can people check that out whenever it comes out?
So follow us on Instagram, because we'll be announcing all the launch, and we'll be on every single platform once we're launched and ready to go.
What's your Instagram handle? Just
The Conservateur.
Perfect. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I've loved getting the chance to be able to speak to you. We probably should exchange war stories at some time, though, about our college
I totally agree.
experiences.
And you have to come on our podcast as well once we get that up and going.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. Everyone, please subscribe to them or follow them on Instagram. Follow @SpillingSweetTea, and we'll see you next time.